How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 6 of What If Deku Had Sunshine. And now, let's begin. Izuku, you gotta wake up. All of a sudden, Izuku would jolt up from his limpless state as black tendrils would end up going everywhere, hanging onto trees and gripping onto them. As Izuku's falling into a portal would then be flung right out of it, as he would then just fall right into one of the treetops surrounding him. In order to understand Izuku's situation and surroundings, we have to go back just around 1 week. Izuku and his class had been told that they were about to go on a summer training camp so that they can get more experience as their heroes. So, with them preparing to go to this training camp, Izuku was stretching out in the yard. So what do you guys think we're going to do in this training camp? Well, I think it's actually just going to be what it's implying. Training, which is gonna suck, but hopefully it'll make us great heroes along with it. Izuku would nod his head as the next day would then come. All of the students would pile into the room where Aizawa would then tell them to go down to the bus bay. We are going to get onto that bus and then travel around 2 hours up onto a mountaintop where we are going to be training. It's highly secluded, so hopefully there's not going to be any interference like what's been happening with some of the last field trips. We're hoping. As all of the students would end up going on and piling onto the bus, Izuku and his class would just be talking on the bus for the entire ride there. However, before they could reach the mountaintop, the bus would come to a screeching halt. They would then be kicked off the bus, where they would then see Aizawa along with 4 other people standing next to him. Well, class, you see the top of that mountain up there? You're gonna have to climb this mountain, and you either have to do it in 2 hours and get dinner, or if you succeed or go over that time limit, you won't get any dinner, so you'll go the night starving. So I suggest getting to that hike. It could take quite a while if you don't start early. As the class would then jolt into action, rushing up the hill. However, Izuku wouldn't be like many of them who are trying to sprint up the mountain. That simply was just a stupid idea, as they were going to waste their energy right at the start, and that would leave their entire rest of the climb just in pain because they are completely devoid of energy. So Izuku would take it slow, going with a slow medium jog where he could keep up with for a very long pace and distance. With the rest of his class falling behind, Izuku would continue on with his medium jogging pace up until he would end up reaching the top of the mountain. As Izuku would end up getting there, Aizawa would look at him and then behind him down towards the mountain and would then ask, "Izuku, where's all your classmates? I could have sworn you guys were in a group when you left." Izuku would then sort of laugh. Well, they all sort of just sprinted away up towards the mountain and lost all their energy right at the start. I pretty much just tried to keep a medium pace and to preserve my energy. It's actually, still quite tiring though. It's quite the steep mountain. Aizawa would then nod his head before sitting down and waiting. Izuku had made it up the mountain with just an hour left to spare, so he had done it in half the time that Aizawa had given them. However, it would take another 2 hours for his class to end up finishing. Well, since all of you took so long to get here, I'll let you all have a treat. You get to watch Izuku eat dinner, since he made it here 2 hours before all of you. It's quite a shame that Class 1A couldn't make it here on time. I was gonna swear I already told them you guys were one of my best classes. But now look, you wasted all your energy like complete buffoons right on the first couple meters. It's a shame you couldn't have made it here on time so you could eat dinner. I actually made it myself, and I'm quite the cook after all. Izuku could be sitting there looking down at the delicious plate of food in front of him before he would then dig in, devouring the plate right there, as the rest of his class would look on, just in shock and hunger. They were left without food since they didn't make it. However, they weren't left completely starved. Aizawa had given them one singular piece of stale bread so that they could have a little energy for the morning, as they weren't going to get breakfast until after morning's training. So they already knew this week was about to be complete hell for them. So when the next day would come, all of them who had to sleep outside, not being allowed to sleep inside, just to show that you need to have a tough heart to make it through being a hero. And if you just decided to walk off quitting, you would then have a bus take you back to the city and you would be expelled from UA right there. So you had to get through this training camp, and if you didn't, you're just going to be expelled. So there was a lot at stake for these students, and so it really was a complete nightmare for them. As the day would come, all of them would be forced to do that run down the mountain and then up it. Once they made it back, they would have to do a ton of sprints, all sorts of different things, and they would then be released into the wild. And after that, once the moon set, they could come back, having to survive with all the wilderness and beasts that the heroes had created with their quirks. So not only did they have to hunt and make food for themselves out there, they also had to defeat these monsters created by those heroes' quirks out there as well. So it was basically a survival day, as the next day would come and the training would then follow. So, as the days would end up coming to an end, Aizawa had given them the last day off of the week to just sit and relax, knowing that their muscles needed to grow and expand so that they had gotten a lot of experience from this, but they also needed to let their muscles rest, or else they could possibly never recover from such a grueling and hard training regimen. So, with that, they would all end up just getting the day to relax. And once night fell, they had all decided to play a round of hide-and-seek or two. So with them rushing off around the forest surrounding the mountaintop, they ended up smelling something and seeing something, or many of them did, that was just below the mountain, and it was spreading up towards them. It was a massive blue fire that was coming and hurtling in fast paces. It was like a tsunami of blue flames. It just kept coming and coming and coming, and they just didn't know what to do. Many of them rushed back to the top of the mountain, where Aizawa and the rest of the heroes were already there standing in shock at what was before them. Aizawa would yell for the heroes to go and get some of the students and to protect them, as he would rush off yelling for all of the students to come back to the base. However, many of them had wandered quite far, and they may have been subject to an attack. Aizawa would end up seeing portals form all around the different types and the different terrains of the mountain, as you would see tons of villains pop out of these portals. Aizawa would tell them all to load onto the bus and that they needed to go. As they would all be trying to do this, the bus would then explode. Many of the students be sent flying backwards, as Izuku, who had yet to get on the bus, would end up seeing many of his classmates just be hitting the ground and sliding down. Izuku would jump forward and would yell for them, "Why don't you just take me? Don't let these people be hurt by your foolish plans. I'll offer myself as a sacrifice. Just let them go." Aizawa would tell Izuku to stop being so rash and stupid and idiotic. However, Izuku didn't care. He wanted his friends to go on and be safe, and he was going to give himself up for it. And besides, he knew he could easily take down some small-time villains, especially if they were the ones from the USJ. How easy he took down the army of these strange Nomu monster things. He could easily take down just a band of thugs. It should be no problem for him, as he's by far one of the strongest in the UA classroom, out of all the first years and maybe even the entire school. However, another explosion would end up happening, as the building behind them would end up exploding. Izuku would be sent flying backwards, as he would end up landing down. As he was doing this, a portal would open up beneath him, and that is where we get to where I started this what if off. "Wake up, Izuku! You must wake up!" As Izuku would jolt up forward after being unconscious for just under 5 seconds, black tendril-looking things would spew out of Izuku's body, grabbing onto all of the trees nearby, propelling himself upwards, as Izuku would end up looking around, seeing for any villains while he was up in the air. Izuku, as quirk had activated, being one for all. Having gotten it from All Might, he had been training with All Might in Gran Torino on his days off, and just had decided to mention it to any of his classmates, knowing that he had to keep the quirk a secret. So with One for all now activated, Izuku would end up looking around. It was nighttime and he couldn't use his sunshine abilities, as he was the weakest at night, but with the newfound power in One for All, having gotten it from All Might, he was now stronger than ever at night, so he could be confident with taking these villains down. So as Izuku would end up looking around, he would see that his class was trying to get on it to another emergency bus that had luckily pulled up right in time, having decided that Aizawa would take them all back early a couple hours before. As many of them were loading onto the bus, Izuku would yell for them that they need to depart now, and there's no time for him to make it there. Aizawa would look one time back at Izuku before giving him a nod of respect before rushing off, as Izuku would then fall down through another portal and right into a chair, where court-canceling handcuffs would end up being placed on top of Izuku's hands, as he would then be tied down into a chair. Well, 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 what do we have here? The UA first year's top brat. Isn't that something? You couldn't have defeated those small-time villains we sent up there, could you? Oh, I just loved seeing your teacher look back, seeing you having to sacrifice yourself, wishing it could have been him. Oh, I wish I could relive it over and over again. What do you want, Shigaraki? Izuku would say this, as Shigaraki would then just laugh. Oh, what do I want? I don't know. How about this? Your powers can be quite useful to us, so why don't you join us? It's a simple question. Hopefully I won't have to force you or do anything to you to make you join. Izuku would then sigh before saying, alright, I guess I'll join you then. I mean, you gotta try everything at least once. Shigaraki would look on in shock at Izuku, who just defeatedly just gave up a sign that he was going to become a villain. Shigaraki just was confused. He thought for sure he was going to have to use one of those experiments the doctor had made so that he could forget his memories or something. But here Izuku was now just accepting being a villain, and it kind of confused Shigaraki. Well, oh well then, I guess you can become a villain. I'll lead you to your room then. Don't try any funny business yet. You'll have your initiation to prove yourself tomorrow, Shigaraki would say, as Izuku would then walk over, or be led over, to a room where Shigaraki would then place Izuku down before telling him goodbye. This room looked like it was steel-padded and just had a singular bed sitting in the middle. Izuku would sit there completely confused on what to do before he just started counting, as Izuku would continue on counting how many seconds he was in that room. The next day, Shigaraki would come back to see Izuku, who was still counting. Izuku had decided not to get any sleep that night, wanting to just count. It was kind of a strange thing, but Shigaraki just assumed he was going insane or something, and that possibly could have just been the cause of why Izuku had decided to join them. So with Izuku deciding to join Shigaraki and the villains, Izuku would end up being given a villain costume, which he would just put it on. It was a simple black and white suit, so with Izuku now putting it on, he would end up walking down, where he would end up seeing a civilian sitting there struggling against all of the restraints that they had put on it. Well, since you are deciding to become a villain so eagerly, I'll decide to test you on it. Kill them. As Izuku would look down to see two people sitting in front of him, restrained, as both of them were struggling. However, I'll give you a choice. You can choose one of them. Only one. So, who will it be, Izuku? Who will you save? As Izuku would look on down in shock, as he had yet to kill anyone besides those brainless Nomus, which he had no remorse for because they were brainless. So Izuku staring down at two living people, as one of them would end up start struggling, moving his head over as if pointing towards them, as if yelling for him to save her, while the other one was just yelling for him to die, as Izuku was wondering what he should do, completely in shock, as Izuku could see out of a window that it was sunny. Izuku would end up grabbing an axe that was on his back still, as the axe had come to him during the night, leaving a hole in the wall which Shigaraki had seen but had decided to pay no mind since Izuku was still there. So with the axe in hand, Izuku would raise it up to the sky before slamming it down on to the person below, having barely just missed him, curving it out of the way right at the end. Izuku would then struggle to continue on before he would tell himself, this is gonna be hard, before lifting up his axe and slashing it both ways, killing one of them that was standing in front of him. However, the blast had caused the other one as well to end up being injured. Shigaraki would then smile before saying, "Well done, Izuku. I guess you passed the test. Although it took quite a while, I guess it was hard for your first kill. You are still quite new to this villainy thing after all." As Izuku would then nod his head before walking back to wherever he was supposed to be. Izuku would set his axe down that now had stained blood on it. Izuku was just sitting there with his head on his forehead wondering, what did he do? As Izuku would be doing this, a couple of months would end up passing. Izuku had done a few types of many things, but had yet to kill another person, not wanting to be falling so low. Sure, he was a villain, but that's just what his ideals were. He didn't want to kill someone at all, as he thought innocent people should still live, and it's the heroes that they're truly after. Izuku would be sitting down at a bar. Shigaraki would end up coming and sitting next to him. "Hey, Izuku, I've noticed you haven't done anything truly evil or villainy yet. Sure, you've injured a couple heroes here and there, but that's not really what I think is quite that act of villainy. So just to make sure you're an actual villain, I've actually got another thing, just to make sure you don't betray us, in case you're just some sort of double agent." As Izuku would be led down into a dark dungeon type thing, Izuku would end up seeing two people blindfolded and tied up. Izuku would walk forward before realizing who both of them were. It was his parents, as someone was then standing behind them with a neck to their throat. "So, just to make sure you don't betray us, I happen to have something built. You see this remote here? With a single press of a button, these two will be informed to off both of your parents. So please, don't try to do anything stupid while being in the league. You can always leave, but don't try to break your parents out. We'll be forced to do something to them." As Izuku was just in complete shock, as he would end up walking away, not sure what to do. There his parents were being held against their will by this villain, and now he was for sure a villain. He couldn't just betray them now, because he had their parents. He didn't want to betray them and then lose his parents. It's just something he couldn't do and couldn't live with himself if he managed to do it. So as another week would end up passing, Izuku would just decide that it's too hard being a villain. He would end up telling Shigaraki that he should let his parents go and he's not going anywhere. With Shigaraki would just laugh. "Oh, please, Izuku. We've already let them go. It was just to make sure you didn't do anything. It was a scare tactic." All of a sudden, a massive hole would end up being just punched right into the warehouse that they were in, as a shining yellow golden figure would end up being standing right in front of them. "I am here," before grabbing Shigaraki, as he would look over to see Izuku, who would then jump away, having put on a disguise every time he had went in to the bar or the warehouse, since anyone could just walk into it. He didn't want to be recognized since his face was plastered everywhere as a missing person. So with All Might standing there with Shigaraki in a chokehold, Izuku having jumped away, All Might would try to pursue him with Shigaraki, but it was no use, as another hero would end up jumping in, grabbing many of the other villains that were there as well. Izuku, who had jumped away, would end up seeing the battle unfold, as gray sort of goop would end up appear out of nowhere, sort of looking like some sort of slime monster. Sort of like a sludge monster he had heard about in the news a couple of months back. As this sludge would end up expanding and growing, a tall person in a suit would end up stepping out. "Hello, All Might. We meet again." The voice was striking, and Izuku could recognize it almost immediately. He had heard the person talking over a static TV a couple times. It was no mistake. This person was the boss of the League of Villains. as All Might would end up throwing back Shigaraki to another hero to capture him. All Might would end up looking on towards All For One before yelling, "This is where it ends." All Might would rush right on towards All For One. However, All For One would easily dodge all of All Might's attacks before starting to punch and use some of his quirks as well. All Might and All For One looked almost equal, both of them having their respected injuries, with All For One having to use a breathing mask, with All Might also having that just hole-looking thing in his top of his chest. So as Izuku would end up being looking on through the top of a building, he would end up being confronted by a hero. However, Izuku would tell him that he's not doing anything and he's not a villain. He just happened to be on top of this villain top on this rooftop doing something strange, like sort of dress up. The hero would just say okay before jumping off strangely. Izuku would facepalm, wondering if that's how easy it is to fool a hero these days, before taking off his hero outfit into the regular clothes that were on underneath of it. Jumping down, he would end up seeing All Might and All For One's fight continue on. However, he could tell All Might was struggling to continue on using the power of One For All. So Izuku would yell for All Might to jump back, as All Might, hearing Izuku's words, would then listen to it. They had practiced doing a couple moves together when they were training, so with that, All Might instantly knew what Izuku was planning on doing. A move that they had practiced where All Might would jump in first, taking many of the blows, tiring out one of the villains, before Izuku would hop in and punching it with all of his strength. All Might would realize that Izuku, who had been missing for a couple of months now, had just yelled for his name. However, on instinct, he would jump back with Izuku right there and would end up punching All For One right in the stomach, who was caught off guard. All For One would then end up laughing before jumping back. "So I see who your successor is, All Might. So it must be the young Izuku Midoriya. I happen to remember when he happened to kill someone as an initiation to join the League of Villains. Well, that's just something to fool your mind a little bit and make you start to think. It did happen, though, and he was a part of the League for quite a while. Do you remember the hero, or the villain named, let me think. Oh, the blacksmith. Yes, that's right. Do you remember that? Because of his use of random sorts of weapons. What? No, that can't be Izuku. He never falls so low. Oh, but it was your own successor, All Might. It was. All of a sudden, two Nomus would end up appearing right next to All For One's side. Oh, and Izuku. Do you happen to remember ever seeing your parents since a week ago? Izuku would look on towards All For One before shaking his head. Well, you're seeing them right now, both to my sides. Yes, that's right. Your parents just happen to become the most powerful Nomus we've ever created. Isn't that something? Your mom on my left and your father on the right. Both of them became extremely powerful after only a couple experiments on them. They both have insanely powerful quirks of my request. So why don't you go on and face them? If you want to win, you'll have to kill your parents, both of them. Could you live with yourself after doing that? I've made sure they have extreme regeneration quirks via my extreme catalog of random assortments of quirks that I've gotten. It's almost impossible to completely destroy them without killing them. So I'll let you be Izuku, and I'll let you think on your decision. As All For One would try to leave, before Izuku would jump in before All For One could even say a command to the Nomus, grabbing All For One's neck, slamming him down into the ground. How dare you! All For One would then end up laughing at Izuku's rage. Oh, please, Izuku. This is nothing. Izuku would look down at the beating sun above him as it was prime time daylight. It was almost 12 p.m., he thought, as All For One would then end up laughing. You can't defeat me or these Nomus, Izuku. Besides, you're never gonna go full power on your own parents, could you? It's irreversible what I've done to them. So you might as well just accept it now. Before All For One could do anything, Izuku would slam a punch right down into his metal respirator, completely destroying it, as All Might would then jump in, grabbing All For One, putting quirk-canceling handcuffs around him, before pushing him off to where a bunch of police officers were standing behind them. Right before All Might could even do anything else, All for One would yell a command towards the Nomus. Kill those two, and after them, do as much destruction as you possibly can. As the Nomus would then lock eyes with Izuku, they would jump straight at him, going for an attack with Izuku, who would just continue on trying to dodge, pleading with them to stop this, that they please can remember him, but they couldn't. All of Izuku's attempts to communicate with his parents were none. They weren't his parents anymore. They were just simply mindless Nomu bird monsters. Izuku would continue on pleading, but would end up deciding and knowing that it was no use. His parents were long gone, and he had to do what he just couldn't get himself to do. As Izuku would end up slowly grabbing the axe off of his back, lifting it up into the air. Izuku would slash both of them clean in two, however they would continue on regenerating and pushing Izuku back and back. Izuku would continue on jumping around in a circle, trying to limit as much destruction as he possibly could. The Nomus would continue on trying to defeat Izuku, however they couldn't land a hand on him. Izuku, with the power of One for All and the strength he had gotten from Sunshine, it was just far too much, and the speed was too much for them to handle. As Izuku was continue on trying to just end them humanely, he couldn't get himself to end with a finishing, killing blow. As Izuku would continue on doing this, he would end up remembering the words All for One had said to him just a couple minutes prior. He's not going to be able to destroy them without killing them, which, I mean, that's quite a given, but he's not going to be able to destroy them using a sword or slash because of the regeneration thing, so he's not going to even have anything to remember them off of. So as the sun would end up beating down, Izuku would end up hearing church bells ringing from the distance. It was now 12 p.m. as Izuku would end up, well, not church bells, my bad, guys. Bells and all sorts of clocks would end up ringing, letting everyone know it was now the middle of the day. Izuku would end up realizing this, knowing that time was now the time. Izuku would lift his hand up into the air, much similar to Goku with the Spirit Bomb, as a massive sun would end up being created right in his hand. Izuku would jump back and back as the beating sun would start melting things around them, like cars and other sorts of things. As many of the people surrounding it would end up seeing two suns, as many of them just couldn't comprehend what was happening. Izuku would lift his hand up once more as the Nomus would end up rushing towards him. Izuku would then point his hand down to the ground, moving the new sun, before slamming it into both of his parents, completely vaporizing their Nomu bodies. As Izuku would end up seeing that there was no more of them, he would fall to his knees completely just in shock, not knowing what he had just done. He couldn't live with himself after that. So, once Izuku got back up, All Might, he would feel a hand on his shoulder. It was of All Might's. However, he couldn't do it. He would then end up walking off, where he wouldn't be seen for the next couple of weeks, having to take some time off. However, he would then return towards UA, where he would finish off his education, becoming a hero. All around just the country and the world, people knew of Soup, the hero Soup. I can't keep a straight face saying his hero named Soup. But everyone knew the hero named Soup. After he graduated, everyone rejoiced that he was now going to become a hero. After he defeated All for One and those Nomus, possibly saving the country and world, and also with his victory over Stain the Hero Killer, everyone knew his name. So Izuku would easily become one of the most favorited heroes of all time, as he would be the number one hero. However, he still couldn't live with himself after just killing his parents. He could live, but he just couldn't remember thinking about it, ending up burying all of those memories back in his mind. And that is where I'm going to leave this what if off. I mean, that's where this what if ends, everyone. It's where this part is left off and where this what if ends. You guys can think what happens to him after he ends up becoming the number one hero and all the other villains he'd end up having to defeat. But I thank you all for watching the series.